Hi, beautiful people. Welcome to the Fort Salem Library, where we read you your fanfiction. So sit down or don't, relax or don't, and enjoy these stories in a way you have not before. We at Fort Salem Library do not own Motherland Fort Salem or any of the related characters. The Motherland Fort Salem series is created by Elliot Lawrence and owned by Freeform. This story is a work of fanfiction and is meant for entertainment only. We are not making any profit from these stories. All rights of the original Motherland Fort Salem story belong to Freeform. We also do not own All That Remains or any of its original characters and storylines. We did, however, get permission from the author to read their story. This story was created and written by TrueFreak89, and you can find the link in our show notes. This story is being read to you by Angela.
All That Remains, Chapter 9. Scylla had always been a light sleeper. Most Dodgers were, at least the ones who didn't get caught, that is. A deep, peaceful sleep was not something people like Scylla could afford when the United States military might be just one step behind them at any given moment. That was why she was so confused when she woke up in Rael's bunk beside the sleeping girl. She didn't remember falling asleep, and with no natural light so far underground, she couldn't immediately tell how long she'd been out for. She peeked out of the curtain Rael hung up for privacy. Across the other side of the room, the bellwether girl lay curled up under a blanket in her bunk, fast asleep. Scylla listened quietly in the dark and picked up on the sound of Tally breathing softly in the bunk above her. She checked her watch, the illuminated hands of the clock showing it was early morning. Scylla had slept soundly for close to 10 hours. She didn't think she'd ever slept that long in her entire life before. Perhaps it was the illusion of safety that came from being in a warm bed with a roof over her head that had lulled her body into ignoring all of its basic instincts of self-preservation. Or maybe it had more to do with the girl pressed up at her back. The bunk was standard issue and meant to sleep one, but Rael and Scylla were as small and slight as each other and were curled up comfortably. Scylla stifled a yawn with the back of her hand. It would be light out soon, and she should have been making her move to get off the base. It would be easier to slip out before the changing of the guard, when the soldiers on the night shift would be tired and most likely to let her pass without too many questions. For all both Rael and Anacostia had insisted she could leave any time, Scylla wasn't so sure. She trusted Rael believed what she was saying, but Scylla couldn't see the military just letting her walk away, even without knowing she was a witch. If they discovered her true nature, there would be no way she was walking out of Iron Mountain anytime soon. Lying on her side, Scylla felt her lighter digging into her thigh. It was her get-out-of-jail card, her ticket to freedom when things went south. She couldn't count how many times she changed her appearances since going AWOL from War College. Scylla would have been caught years ago if it weren't for the tricks she learned from the spree, and her own wits. Her survival instinct told her to get up and get out, but her body and her mind weren't on the same page. Behind her, Rael stirred. She gave a sigh, still fast asleep, and buried her face against Scylla's shoulder. Scylla knew she had to leave, but she couldn't pull herself away. She closed her eyes, savoring in the feeling of the other girl pressed at her back, and wishing she could have just one more day. One more day to pretend she might ever have a life with someone like Rael. It was a fantasy, and a dangerous one at that. Scylla knew better than to indulge in that kind of thinking. It would wind up getting her killed. Scylla hadn't made it to almost 21 years old by being stupid. But then, she'd felt nothing before, like the pull she felt towards the other girl. She didn't understand it. Rael was intoxicating to her senses. She dulled them like alcohol and set them on fire all at the same time. Scylla had only known Rael for 3 days, yet she'd already made a ton of reckless decisions because of her. Sticking around would only lead to countless more. She had to leave, and soon. Scylla didn't think she could face walking away from Rael when she was awake. She turned over, tucking one hand under her chin, while the other brushed Rael's hair back from her face. The young fixer was beautiful and kind, and Scylla felt like she'd known her forever, not just days. Scylla was a deeply private person. Such was the nature of growing up a Dodger. From an early age, she'd been taught to keep herself to herself. Don't attract attention. Don't share too much. And tell no one you're a witch. Her parents' rules still ran through her head, even now. But, for the first time in her life, Scylla found herself wanting to ignore them. She wanted to tell Riel everything, including that she was a witch. Hiding her true nature from Riel felt wrong. They were the same, and it was killing her to keep that a secret. For a moment, she entertained the thought of telling Riel everything, that she was a necro and their parents were Dodgers, that she'd set the oath and enlisted, gone through basic and half of her first year of war college as a double agent for the spree before going AWOL. Riel had shown herself to be sympathetic with the spree. Maybe she would understand and they could both run away from the Iron Mountain, leave the military behind and go north. There are rumors that the cold stopped the freakers, that settlements in Canada and Alaska were thriving without hordes. Without the risk of hordes and the weight of the military bearing down on her, Riel could be free too. She wouldn't need to worry about turning and becoming a prisoner in her own body ever again. Riel sighed. It was a fanciful idea. Riel would never leave. Besides only knowing Scylla for a few days, nowhere near long enough to expect Riel to abandon her entire life for her, Riel would never leave her unit behind. It was clear they were like a family. Scylla couldn't see Bellwether going AWOL. The High Atlantic had said little to her, but Scylla got the distinct impression Abigail didn't like her. Scylla was good at picking up on that kind of thing. It was a useful trait, one that kept her a step ahead and out of a jail cell, or worse. Running off into the sunset with Riel was a pipe dream. Scylla couldn't stay, and Riel would never leave, and it was as simple as that. Scylla pressed a gentle kiss to the other girl's forehead, trying not to wake her. She had to go while she still had the chance. Slipping out of bed, she pulled on her boots and laced them back up before she crept out of the Bellwether dorm, easing the door shut behind her. The corridors were empty this time of morning. It was practically still nighttime after all. Most people were sleeping or working the night shift. The few people she passed, mostly military, paid her little attention on the way to the family dorms. The Robinsons were all asleep when Scylla slipped into the dorm she shared with them. In the month she'd spent with them, the dorm was the nicest place they'd slept by far. It had 4 walls, a roof, and heating. Scylla couldn't blame them for sleeping soundly now they felt safe. Family was one of many. Scylla could lie and say there had been too many to remember, but the truth was she remembered each one she'd saved. Scylla climbed up onto her bunk and pulled a battered leather notebook and a pen out of her backpack. The pages were all curled and yellowing with age, and each filled with tally marks. Scylla flipped to the last page of marks and added 5 more. She paused, then added another mark, for Riel, before tucking the pen between the pages and stuffing the notebook back into her bag with a sigh. It was time to move on. She reached for a hair tie on her wrist, intending to tie her hair back, but then she remembered her witch's mark at the last second. The mark was prominent at the nape of her neck, but easily hidden by her hair. Scylla had known Dodgers with marks in far more inconvenient places, like a girl she'd met in the session whose witch mark was splashed over one cheek like a blot of ink. She'd worn half a ton of concealer daily to keep it hidden. Scylla left her hair down for the time being. She'd tie it up when she was off the base. After pulling on a warm hoodie and her waterproof jacket, she climbed down from her bunk and slung her backpack over one shoulder. She had one last thing to do before she left. The corridors of the base were still a maze to her, but Scylla eventually found her way to one of the elevators to the surface. Her finger had just pressed a button when a voice rang out from behind her. "Hello." Scylla jumped like an extra in a horror movie, and spun around to find a little girl standing in front of her in the otherwise empty corridor. Hello?" Scylla did her best to gloss over her initial reaction to the mysterious girl, her lips curling up into a dimpled smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hi, I'm Kalida. You're Scylla." It wasn't a question. The little girl looked to be about 10 years old, but she spoke with the authority of someone much older. Her big brown eyes held an old soul within them. Scylla had once stood at the foot of Methuselah in California with her parents. It was a 5,000-year-old pine tree and the oldest in America. Scylla had felt small and insignificant in comparison to the ancient tree, and she felt exactly the same standing in front of Kalida. Yes I am, and you must be Adil's sister." Scylla recognized the girl's name. Adil had spoken fondly of his little sister during their time in the garden earlier. Yes, Cleta nodded, her hands clasped in front of her. Despite being dressed in bunny pajamas, she held herself with the same regal air as General Alder. You saved Rael. She's my friend. You know, you shouldn't leave. It's not safe. Scylla shuffled her feet and subconsciously adjusted the strap of her backpack on her shoulder. The little girl had a way of staring right through a person, like she was weighing Scylla's worth with her eyes. Thanks, but I know how to handle myself, said Scylla, her patient smile straining at the corner. You do, Cleta agreed without blinking, and somehow Scylla found her agreeableness even more disturbing. But you are not the one who will be in danger. Rael will be. Scylla faltered. Her piercing blue eyes trained on the younger girl as she frowned. What are you talking about? Scylla had made grown men weep with that glare, but the 10-year-old didn't blink. Rael needs you here. Rael doesn't even know me. Not yet, but she will. Cleta cocked her head to the side, considering something before she spoke again. You'll leave no matter what I say. I saw it. But you'll see, and then you'll come back. Sure, said Scylla, humoring the strange girl. She was wasting precious time standing around talking to the young witch when she should have been making her escape. Guess I'll see you then. You will, Cleta nodded. With that said, she turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner at the end of the corridor, and leaving the hairs on the back of Scylla's neck standing on edge. She jabbed the button to call the elevator and wrapped her arms around herself while she waited for it. The Iron Mountain grew more suffocating by the second. Scylla needed to get out of there. The elevator took its sweet time in reaching the surface. Scylla was close to clawing at the walls by the time the door opened with a ping. She flew out of the metal box at breakneck speed. The elevator led out into a cavernous, empty room. The concrete walls were bare and the linoleum floor squeaky clean. More of the reflective strips of tape led from the elevator to the exit, where two huge blast-proof doors stood open. A cool morning breeze wafted in, and Scylla took her first breath of fresh air in almost a day. 5 minutes later, and she was past the guards at the front of the gate with minimal fuss. She was free again, but for the first time in her life, freedom left a stale taste in her mouth. I can't believe Scylla just left without saying a word, Rael huffed, stuffing her left foot into her boot and yanking on the laces hard enough to make one of them snap. Fuck! Rael had woken up 20 minutes earlier and found herself alone in bed, a folded note waiting for her on her pillow. The note now lay open and discarded at the foot of her bed. Scylla's fancy cursive on show for all the world to see. Sorry I couldn't stay. ... S. X. ... You barely know anything about this girl, said Abigail, playing devil's advocate, while Tally busied herself looking through her footlocker for replacement lace. Rael shook her head. You don't get it, Abs. It feels like I've known her my whole life. I can't explain it. It just does. Geez, why are lesbians so clingy? Abigail crossed her arms and rolled her eyes as Rael flipped her off in return. I need to go after her. It's not safe out there. Rael pulled on another boot, careful not to tug too hard on the laces this time. Maybe she's better off out there, Tally suggested, holding out a spare lace for her. Rael snatched it out of her hand. What are you talking about? There's nothing out there, Tal. A handful of shitty settlements, and that's it. Nowhere on Earth is safer than this base, and you know it. Rael glared at her sister witch and noticed a flicker of something in her expression. Her eyes narrowed as she jumped up. You know something, don't you? What? What is it, Tally? Tell me! Step off, caller. Abigail stepped in, tugging Tally away from Rael by her arm. She and Abigail had fought like cat and dog since the first day of basic, but it wasn't like Rael to snap at Tally. Scylla's one of us, okay? Tally snapped, letting her secret come tumbling out. Her answer struck Rael like a physical blow. She took a step back, eyes wide in disbelief. What? Ideal met her yesterday when we were gardening, Tally explained. He asked if Scylla was a necro. She said no, but Ideal picks up on these things. I didn't say anything because I thought she might be a dodger and that's why she didn't want to stay. I'm sorry, Ray. I should have said something. It's not your fault, Tel. Rael shook her head as she dropped back onto her bunk with a thought. I'm sorry for snapping. I just can't believe she didn't tell me. I guess it explains how she got an entire family across the session in one piece, though. I've met plenty of Dodgers. They used to come to our compound to work in exchange for food and shelter. They're secretive people by nature, said Tally, trying to nurse Rael's ego. They live in constant fear of the military finding them. It's no surprise Syl didn't shout it from the rooftops that she's a necro. If they did their duty, they wouldn't need to live in fear of us, Abigail snarled, sounding more like her mother than herself. Careful, Abs, your bellwether is showing, Rael snapped back at the other girl. We signed up, and we were still living in fear of Alder. She almost sent us out to be war meat when we challenged her over those civilian hostages getting killed. Abigail bristled, but didn't argue. She'd entered the military expecting to breeze through basic training and rise through the ranks in War College, and then she'd partnered with Tally and Rael, and the cracks in the military propaganda machine that she'd so skillfully ignored for so long had turned into gaping holes. No wonder she wanted to leave so bad, Rael mused, rubbing at her forehead. She was probably terrified of being arrested. Or worse, said Abigail, her expression softening. I've heard of Dodgers being made an example of before the infection took hold. I wouldn't like to think what Alder would do now. If you want my opinion, Scylla is better off out there. I'm not so sure, Rael bit her lip. Scylla might have been a Dodger, but that wasn't all she was. Alder's desperate for more necros to protect the base. Maybe even desperate enough to pardon a Dodger, said Tally, picking up Rael's line of thinking. Exactly, Rael perked up, breaking out in a grin as a plan formed in her mind. If I can get Alder to agree to it, then Scylla can settle here, and she'll be safe. Who says she'll even want to stay? Abigail asked. She threw her hands up as Rael's eyes widened, and didn't give the blonde a chance to object. I just mean, what if she doesn't want to? Then that'll be her choice. Rael wasn't stupid. She couldn't make Scylla stay or even come back, but she could at least offer her the choice. There's nothing out there in that shit for her. It's not safe, not even for a necro. I have to find Scylla and at least give her the choice. Should we go to Alder first? Telly piped up uncertainly. Rael shook her head. No way. My mama always said it's better to beg for forgiveness than ask permission. I'll deal with Alder when I get back. Rael had all the leverage she needed when it came to persuading Alder. She had saved the older witch's life, and she was the only one who could physically cure the infected. That had to be worth something. How do you even plan on finding Scylla? She could have been gone for hours. Abigail pointed out the obvious kink in Rael's plan. Yeah, but she left on foot, and I have the best seer in our mountain. Rael shot a hopeful smirk Tally's way. That is, if you'll help. Of course, said Tally, locking eyes with Abigail. Unity. Right, Abs? Right, Abigail nodded reluctantly. We're still off duty, so nobody will miss us today. If we take off now, we might pick up our trail, but we'll need transport. Rael's grin widened. I think I can swing it. No way. Bridie shook her head and turned her back on Rael and her unit. She snatched up a rag that lay on the cart beside the car she was working on and wiped her hands with it. No way in hell am I giving the three of you bikes to take off on some unsanctioned joyride. It's not like that, Rael insisted, trailing after the other woman and getting under her feet like a wayward puppy. Rael worked in the auto shop under Bridie's command when she wasn't out scavenging with her unit, and she hoped their friendship would have some sway with the older witch when it came to asking for a favor. We want to go back to that town we were at yesterday, but we didn't finish scouting it. There could be more stuff for us there. Oh, so you want to go back to the town you almost died in? Just the three of you? That's much better. Bridie rolled her eyes and stuffed the rag she was holding into the back pocket of her overalls. The answer is no, ladies. She turned her back on them again, fiddling with something under the hood of the car she was working on. Falling to plan B, Rael gave Abigail a meaningful elbow in the ribs. Gotta do everything around here, Abigail mumbled to herself with an exasperated sigh. Stepping past Rael, she stood beside the older witch and leaned against the car to bring their eyes level. Bridie glanced at her once before turning her attention back to the car, but Abigail could see the furrow on the other woman's forehead. Abigail had already won this. Come on, Bridie. My girl got her ass handed to her. She just wants to ride out there, see if there's anything still worth taking, come back victorious as Quartermain's golden girl. Rael started to protest, but was promptly silenced by Tally. Bridie cursed the three of them under their breath before standing up straight again. There is no way I am letting you ladies ride off with military property, but Bridie held her hand up to stop Abigail's objections. Her one good eye narrowed on the bellwether girl. We had some trouble with drifters last week. The two of them won't be needing their bikes anymore. You can take them. I was given one to color for all her hard work around here anyway. Yes, thank you, Abigail squealed, throwing her arms around the other woman. Bridie stiffened, the battle-hardened veteran disturbed by Abigail's casual touching. She shrugged the younger girl off. Yeah, just don't go getting yourselves killed out there. I don't want to be the one accountable to General Bellwether if you do, or, goddess help me, Anacostia. The bikes are parked out back. The keys are on my desk, caller knows where. We'll be safe, I promise, said Abigail, as Rael made a beeline for Bridie's office, and Tally trailed after her. Thanks, Bridie, you're the best. Rael reappeared from the office clutching 2 sets of keys. Yeah, boss, you're the best. We'll be back by nightfall, and thanks. Bridie shook her head from side to side as the bellwether unit all scrambled out of the auto shop through the loading bay. Rael narrowly missing the back end of a truck that was reversing up to the bay. Those idiots are going to get themselves killed.
Please find the fanfiction you just listened to on Archive of Our Own and leave the author some love. Without them, this wouldn't be possible, and we want to thank them from the bottoms of our hearts for creating these amazing stories and keeping the show alive.